Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audi Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at the GP Montreal, the second race in Canada after Quebec the other day. Hopefully it all went okay for you guys. It was a decent performance from me. I had Matthews and Gourmet, so I got first and second with Vowels about it. It was a very weird top 10, I think we'll all agree, and I didn't have Pogacar in my team, which didn't prove to be like as catastrophic as I thought it might have been. So I think I got away pretty lightly there. It certainly led to quite nervous viewing without having Pogacar in my team, but I think we'll rectify that this time round. Obviously, the main man is back in the race, Montreal. I think this race suits him better. Obviously, he's won this race in the past when he out-sprinted Wout van Aert. Not last year, I think it was the year before. Yates won this race last year ahead of Sivakov. I think that Pogacar, he is the favourite for this race, although I think we can all agree that perhaps he didn't look as strong as we thought in Quebec. He didn't manage to get rid of Deli, although you'd argue that the climbs arguably, weren't long enough for Pogacar to really make a difference. And at the end of the day, I think Pogacar will be the likely win this race, and I am going to include him in my team this time because it would be ridiculous to not include him on a race which is very, very similar to how the World Champs course looks. It's almost like holding up a mirror to the World Champs course in Zurich. So obviously Poggy wants to win the World Champs, so he's probably going to use this as a bit of a dress rehearsal. So he sort of has to go in your team this time round. I think we got away with it last time. Deli and Mohoric I wouldn't be picking. Deli was obviously very, very active during Quebec. Very entertaining to see him versus Poggy in that final lap. But this really isn't a race that suits Deli. Even last year when he won the race, he went on to only finish like top 25, top 30 just about in Montreal. So there's no way that I'll be picking him this time around. Mohoric, very similarly, he was just about inside the top 30 in Quebec yesterday. And I just, even after finishing like 5th place last year, he only just finished inside the top 20 in Montreal. So for me, I just don't think that these two are worthwhile the investment. I think you've got some interesting riders in the 22 credit area. You've got Alaphilippe, who is incredibly active, racing very aggressively in Quebec, and that did mean that his result was like 80 something, so it's not the greatest result, but when you, if you look at it on paper, but when you see the amount of attacking he was doing, you can understand why he sort of probably just blew his bolt completely. Although Alaphilippe's history in this race, he's done it twice. He's finished top 15 both times, somewhere between 10th and 15th pretty much. And I probably see him doing something fairly similar this time round. In the Tour of Britain, he was okay, but not brilliant. And so I'm not fully convinced on Alaphilippe, although I do think that he should be fighting for a top 10 in this race for sure. You got Benoit and Jorgensen, and I think that these two are two good choices. Visma Leasebike have got a very strong team for this race. Benoit obviously finished 4th in Quebec. Jorgensen attacked on that final lap, but still finished inside the front group. And generally, there's quite a good correlation between people who do well in Quebec and people who do good in Montreal, especially when you take out the punchy sprinter types who fill in that top 10, who will obviously get dropped in Montreal. I think that Benoit looked really strong, and the fact that he's not really a puncher, I'd say, I think that Montreal suits him better. I think that he will have a better time in Montreal, and he finished 4th in Quebec, so I think that he should be definitely looking towards a top 10, maybe even a top 5. Jorgensen, it's hard to tell how he's going. Obviously he attacked, so it's really hard to tell how he is actually going, because that result of 30th isn't reflective entirely of his abilities. But I would say that he's also a really strong choice. It wouldn't be a bad idea to go with Benoit and Jorgensen in your team, I think. Gourmet, I think this is just too hard for him personally. Kind of similar to Deli, kind of similar to Matthews. I won't be picking him either. Madouas, he's been looking really strong recently. Renee Tour, that final stage, he was 3rd. He was, in the front-ish split in Quebec, but I don't think that was the biggest issue. I think they were going for Gregoire, so I think maybe he was just, not going completely full gas. But the fact that he was still in that front split is promising. because you do see riders go from, say, a top 30 in Quebec, and then they can go and shoot off and get like a top 10 or top 5 in Montreal, just because the race suits him better. So Madouas, I think he's looking towards the world champs at being a leader, and I think that, again, like Pogacar, he's going to be looking to use this as a bit of a dress rehearsal, so I think he's good. Matthews, no. Paulus doesn't have the greatest history of this race, actually, funnily enough, even though I think it suits him. He was top 10 in Quebec, so maybe he's in slightly better form than previous years, but he's always hovering around 20th in Montreal. I'm not really sure why, but I think in theory EF should be using him as their leader. I don't think anybody else really on their team looked that great during the race. Healy attacked once but then pulled out. I probably wouldn't be choosing him over, say, Madouas, Jorgensen or Benoit personally. 20 credit riders, none of these really tempt me. Arambaru hasn't been looking good recently. Ayuso is, I don't know, too busy watching TikToks to be bothered to do any sort of racing or listen in the team meetings, apparently. Baggioli hasn't looked great. Healy, like I said, this race suits him better than Quebec for sure, but it's hard to gauge when his results recently have just been okay. But I would have expected, I would have liked to see some top 10s on his stats to really pick him and have confidence in him. The fact that he did one attack and then just pulled out, it just adds a little bit of mystery. I'm not fully confident in picking somebody who DNF'd Quebec when there are safer options who are cheaper. Tratnik, Velens, Simon Yates. Maybe you might go with Simon Yates. He did finish top 10 in this race last year. Tratnik and Velens, I think, will just be domestiques. 18 credit riders. I only really like Bilbao in this category. He was 9th in Quebec, and he has finished very highly in Montreal before, so I think he's the only one that I'd consider out of these. And finishing in the top 10 of Quebec for a fairly pure climber like Bilbao is a pretty good result, to be honest. 16 credit riders, there are some which I like. I was quite high on Tobias Harland Johannesson in Quebec. He didn't really do anything. I think he was in a couple of moves, but he finished 50-something, so I'm not sure what happened there. So might be a little bit risky going with him, especially when you consider that you've got a few riders here, like Mollema or Schoens, who are both really good choices. Mollema was the big surprise for me of Quebec, finishing 6th place ahead of Pogacar. Schoens, again, I think he was about 20th, but probably building towards the World Championships, which we all know he's a big race performer, is Schoens, and I think that he could definitely be a top 15 or top 20. I think Mollema and him provide a really good kind of dual-pronged attack for Lidl Trek. And possibly I might go with Maxime Van Hills, although his results haven't been that great. However, he was working for Deli in Quebec, so I'm not sure just how much to read into that result, because Van Hills probably wasted a lot of energy just positioning Deli and covering moves and stuff, so maybe he might go better. He should be the leader in theory, because there's no way Deli's getting round. 14 credit riders, Boitrago, you might go with. Bahrain say that he's going to be a protected rider, so you could go with him, although his results recently haven't been that great. You might decide to go Gregoire instead, because he was like 14th or something in Quebec. Guerrero was 15th, which is actually one of the better results that he's had all year, so you might decide to go with him just because he was the best performing Movistar rider, so he should have the backing of Movistar going into this race. Velasco was like top 10 in this race last year, but that was after a better Quebec performance, whereas he was like nowhere in Quebec. He was near 50th, so I'm not really sure what to read into that, even though his recent Italian kind of 1.pro, 1.1 results have been actually quite strong. So maybe he was just, I don't know, working for somebody else in Quebec, and he's actually going to be incredibly good in Montreal. 12 credit riders, I might be tempted to choose Honore. He'll probably finish like top 20, I expect. Mollard, I think, should be one on a lot of our radars now after that 3rd place. That's not come out of nowhere. He's obviously in good form. Him and Madouas should be a really strong combination. And kind of similar to, say, like Mollema and Benoit, I'd say that Montreal suits Mollard better than Quebec did. So I think Mollard is certainly one who's probably turned quite a lot of heads. 10 credit riders, you might choose Hageners because he was 5th in Quebec, but I'd say that he's more of like a puncher. I think that Montreal would be too difficult for him, especially when Visma back. I've got Jorgensen and Benoit, and I'd arguably say Kelderman as well, because Kelderman was 21st in Quebec, and he was super strong during the Tour de Pologne. He was like puncher Kelderman. He was looking really strong, and I think that he could be slept on a little bit. At 10 credits, it's probably quite easy to look over Kelderman and maybe choose somebody like, I don't know, Vermarker or Stephen Williams before him. But I wouldn't sleep on Kelderman that much. I think that he could be a little bit of a dark horse going into this race. Speaking of these two, Vermarker, a little bit off the boil for me in Quebec. I'm not really sure what happened. I would have thought he would be in the top 20, to be honest, considering that nobody in DSM did that great in the race. So not really sure what's going on there, but maybe he was just out of position or whatever. So Vermarker could still be a good choice. Stephen Williams, not really sure what happened to him or just any of the Israel Premier Tech riders during Quebec, considering that this is a really important set of races for them as a Canadian sort of big sponsored team. Williams was just nowhere in Quebec, even though he was really strong during the Tour of Britain. The highest finisher was like Boivin in 31st. So I don't know what Israel Premier Tech were doing. You'd think that if Williams was in good form, he would have been fighting for a good position for Israel Premier Tech, because it's not like they, like I said, as a Canadian back team, there's no way they'd want to just, throw in the towel and not get a good result here. So a little bit of a question mark for me over Stevie Williams, but honestly, if it rains, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes and wins this whole race. Berkmos, honestly, has had some really good results recently, and I think that him and Van Hills will be a really strong combination. I think it was him and Van Hills who were towing De Lee in that final kilometre, so certainly one to be looking at is Jenno Berkmos. Honestly, all the other 8 credit riders, not really a big fan of any of them. 6 credit riders, obviously, is going to be pretty similar to the last video where, you're looking at a handful of riders. You might go with La Pela, although we didn't really do too much in Quebec. You might go with Nerurka, although the EF seems to have about 5 leaders in this race. You might go with Vandenbroek because he was in the break, and I think that he'd stand a better chance if he just stayed in the peloton. I think he could honestly finish top 20. You might go with Wandal because he was a 16th place, or you might go with Zambanini, who's obviously the most sensible one, like last time in Quebec, because he was 10th, and he'll probably still finish top 15 or top 20 even on a bad day. So Zambanini's your best shot. I'd say Wandal is a good one, and then maybe Vandenbroek or something after that. And then the 4 credit riders, Boivin and Baudin. Not Boivin. Baudin is your best one because he was top 15 in Quebec. And that was even after being in a move. Like, he attacked off the front with somebody and then still had the energy to finish top 15. So Decathlon for me, don't really have that many options. And I think that Baudin obviously looks like their best informed rider. You might go with Ubi for assist points on Alaphilippe if you think he's going to do well. You might go with Ineos guys because they're going to get in the break. Leonard or Schmid. Obviously, Schmid was in the break last time, so you could go with either of those because Ineos just, I don't know, they're not that great at the moment. They should probably just get in the break. Or any of the Canadian riders, they'll get in the break as well. So this is my team at the moment. Poggi, Benoit, Schoins, Baudin, Kelderman and Mollema. Bit of a weird team, I will admit. Obviously, Benoit, I could swap him out and put in Madouas or Jorgensen, whatever. Schoins and Mollema, I don't know, I might swap out one of these and try get in, somebody like, I might try and get Millard in, but then I'd have to probably put, I don't know where I'd put my extra credits, I guess is my problem. I could put them onto Baudin to get, like, Berkmos, I guess. Something like that as well could work for me. And I could also not go with Kelderman, I might go with Vermarker or Williams or something like that. So there's a couple of iterations which I'm looking at, but certainly I'm definitely looking at Poggi, I'm definitely looking at Benoit and Mollema just based upon the Quebec performances. But let me know what you're thinking in the comment section down below. I presume we're all going with Poggi this time round, but I'll be interested to hear if anybody's going to go without Pogacar and your reasoning why. And yeah, put all your teams in the comment sections down below, and all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut!